It's Wrestling Observer Radio, the Friday edition. We have a special guest on today's show. You have seen him on this show before. He is back for part 2 because he has a second book out. It is called The Keirn Chronicles Volume 2, the phenomenal wrestling resurgence of Steve Keirn. Steve, how are you?
I'm blessed, man. How are you guys?
We're doing good. Hey,
good.
So the second book, like I think when we talked to you about the first book, like the second book was already started. You were already deep in. And it didn't feel like that long from when I read the first to the second, which was like a nice kind of thing, because sometimes like you watch a movie and the sequel doesn't come out until like 4 years later. So you got to remember everything from the first movie, maybe rewatch it. But the books came out in not that long from each other. And the second book, I'll let you kind of talk about where you kick off the second book, but it really is like two distinct careers almost, with your resurgence getting back into wrestling.
Right. Well, I mean, as far as kicking off, basically, Ian Douglas, my writer, when we were putting the book together, I would record on a Wednesday night, usually about 2 hours or so at a time. And we went for almost a year. And Ian got to a point where he was going, this is going to be a long book if we're going to try to put this in one. I mean, my career spanned 44 years, and that's a full-time 44 years, not in and out, but just, it's something to do with wrestling for 44 years. But he just suggested, let's tell the story, tell it right, but let's make it into 2-book series. So we were really just going from one to the other continuously. And when the first one was finished, we had most of the material for the second one. We hadn't added any photos, and we hadn't, kind of fine-tuned it and everything. But, he was already prepared to just start laying out the second book, and I was all for it. The thing that I understood was I'm one of the first, if not the first, that decided to write 2 books from the beginning. Other wrestlers have written, some others have written 2 books or a second book or whatever, but mine was ready to go boom, 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 and just to finish the whole story.
The thing about your career that's so interesting is that you go from starting out. I mean, you knew about wrestling, by being Mike Graham's friend in high school and everything, and being, with Eddie Graham and everything. So you start out as a teenager and you're already kind of aware, getting an awareness of wrestling and some crazy stories because, the territory days are so long ago and everything. So then you start out, paying your dues for a couple of years, become a star, go from place to place. Then the business completely changes. The territories go away. You have to, basically completely recreate yourself. The Steve Kern, who was a star in the 70s and early 80s, then recreates himself in the 90s. And then because of having experience and contacts and whatever, you ended up, working for Vince McMahon as an agent, and then heading the developmental territory for many years that produced a lot of the guys that are on television. And, it's all the politics behind WWE, which I found really fascinating, because one of the things that I liked about it, and I've told people about the second book especially, is that, but both books, is that I'm reading this and I'm like, this is the unvarnished Steve Kern. This is what he thinks. You can agree with it. I can see where you're coming from. I sometimes, like, just the littlest things. Like one time, I'm reading it, and you like hit like one of my pet peeves when I watch WWE, and it's coming into AEW too, and that is that somebody does a dive for no reason in a match. Okay, all of a sudden you can see it setting up. They're going to a dive, and then immediately they go to a commercial, and it's like, why wait? It's like to me, dive's a dangerous move. You should do it when it's, first of all, it shouldn't be done as much as it's done, but that's a different story completely. But it's like you do it, and then you go to a commercial, and it's like a signal. It's like, I see the guy setting up the dive, and it's like, okay, time to make a sandwich. You know what I mean? Instead of, oh my God, what a great move. Like what's happening next is it's building to the finish. And it's like, nope, that means that they're going to a break and they're going to do nothing during the break if it's picture in picture, and probably less if we don't see it. And then you got to rebuild the match, to the live crowd. And I don't know. I mean, when I read that, it's just like, man, I think that literally every Monday night and Friday night.
Yeah, it was a little frustrating at times, Dave and Garrett. It just, I mean, to me, it got repeated so many different times that it was like, even after I was out of the business for a while, and I have some of my students call and say, hey, coach, would you watch me and give me some advice? Or what do you think about this? Or what do you think about this new move I'm trying and all that? And I'll watch it and I'll be sitting there and all of a sudden, here comes the move. He hit the floor. I said, I'll just look at my wife and say, well, I can go get something to drink right now because they're going into a break. And she goes, well, how do you know that? I said, I spent my whole life doing this. I said, when you're an agent and you're calling those matches, everything has to be right down to the minute. You're on TV, especially those so many live shows. I mean, at the beginning of wrestling, when I first started, everything was taped. I mean, they'd tape the show, especially like right here in Florida, for an example, in Tampa, we tape on Wednesday mornings. But that tape would show just in Tampa region.
Nope.
Looks like Steve.
Some of the regular.
Okay, we got it.
Did it mess up?
Yeah, you're good.
I got a call from a guy named Scam. I get these in the afternoon. I don't know what the deal. I don't know. I don't answer them because then I'm not really good with words. I'm kind of an old grumpy guy. So, it's like, what are you calling me for? But anyway, I apologize. But I mean, so the way wrestling has changed, the way things have changed now, I mean, everything's just fast. It's all fast. I thought you were going to mention before you said the break and everything that, you got to have 3 guys standing on the floor to catch that guy for that moonsault. My friends are ribbing me to death now. I get all of these reels off of Facebook, and it's all these people doing moonsaults because I complained about it. I said, well, push come to shove. If I was, say, 18 again now and I'm trying to get into the wrestling business, I couldn't do it because I can't do a somersault, a flip, and I sure ain't going up to the top rope because my nose starts bleeding if I get on the second rope. It just ain't happening. I mean, I was blessed with the territory days because coming off the top was a DQ and going over was a DQ. So that eliminated a lot of that. But, times change and you just got to roll with it. But I'm glad you found those things interesting because I kind of like went back and forth with Ian, a lot of stuff, especially when we was putting together PWF, which was just a small territory. We started here in Florida. It was myself, Mike Graham, Dusty, and Gordon Soley. And we were on the tail end of the Crockett's run in Florida, and they just abandoned it. And, Mike and I decided, well, let's just pick it up and start running it again. Territory's here, everything's in place. But, I thought, when we talked, Ian was going too much into detail and was paying attention to, okay, how hard it was to get a TV channel, how hard it was to get on. How you had to find somebody that would trade the commercial time so you weren't paying to be on TV or trading out your commercial time. And then directing. The directing was the funniest thing. If y'all could have seen that production and the directions that we had, I mean, you guys you'd have thought I was running a really great comedy show. I mean, we had a big glass director's booth that overlooked the studio. And I stood in the window so they could see me. I mean, I wasn't taking any chances giving directions to referees. Half of those guys I had just taught. I mean, Diamond Dallas Page, Scotty Levy, who later became Raven, Mike Awesome. A lot of the kids that I taught just to have a show, you didn't know what was going to happen half the time. And I'd be on that glass and I'd be going, no, do that. And I'm pointing and everything. But that was a part, like you said, too many hats. Seemed like I had that issue several times in my career. And my honest thing about the whole thing is I really loved my business when I was just a wrestler. All I was responsible for was my match. Did I give them the right thing in the match? Did they get the right finish that the boss wanted me to go through? Did I go long enough and all of that? And once that's over, get in the car and go home. But after that, the agent, running the territory, running the developmental, all of those things. It was just like you get like a big backpack on your back, and everybody puts a weight in, and now you got to see if you can walk around with it on. So, but I had a lot of great people around me. You know, the one thing I want to say, because you mentioned it, but wrestling is an opinion. You're reading my opinion. It's just my opinion. I mean, you know, everything I say in my book is truthful, but I don't try to damage people. I don't try to, you know, bury people. I mean, you know, I just tell the truth. If it comes across in any different situation, you know, it's beyond me. But the idea of having any remorse, I mean, you know, I'm the happiest guy in the world. I mean, that's because I'm retired and I don't have any bosses anymore. And I'm sure not getting on an airplane. Oh, my God. I don't know if you guys are traveling nowadays, but I'm doing autograph things. I was supposed to be in St. Louis about a week ago. I got out to the airport, and I looked at my ticket, and my ticket said go to Charlotte, switch planes. I landed in Charlotte at 2, and the other plane took off at 2:20. I'm sitting in seat 26. I walk up to the girl at the counter, and I said, this don't work. I can't make it. No matter where that plane's at, I'm not going to be off of that other plane in time to make it. So when's the next flight? Oh, well, you were supposed to go out on a 3 o'clock. It'll go out on a 6:30, but it's sold out already. So there's another one at 11:30, and you can wait for that one. But if not, you're going to spend the night in Charlotte. I just picked up the phone and called the promoter and said, guess who ain't coming to St. Louis? I'm not going to spend the night in an airport again. I had just done it the week before in Atlanta. The flights and the delays. And a lot of it had to do, of course, the storms. We've all read about the storms all over the country and everything. But, you know, you're just at their mercy. And that was probably, you know, the worst part to me was the traveling. You know, you're just dealing with whatever happens, you're in their hands, and you know there's no way of getting out of it. So if the flight's late, it doesn't go, canceled, whatever. Go find some way out of the airport, son.
Speaking of traveling,
let me just go real quick. Because this, speaking of traveling, you were in WWE as Skinner during the period before. I mean, like. They've had different eras. I would say as far as the travel. I mean, the 80s for WWF was absolutely insane, and the 90s was still pretty bad. And then they, you know, I'd say mid to late 90s it was better. You know, in the sense of you maybe would do 4 shows a week, and now it's not even bad at all. You know, I mean, with you know, it's to me like I look at what the guys do, and the in-ring is very difficult, but I think that the lifestyle and everything and the pay, you know, for the guys, it's probably the best time for most of these guys to be in the business of any time in history. But when you were there as Skinner, I mean, you're you know, again, like the Florida travel's driving up and down places that, you know, you could take a break, whatever, you know, get in the car. I mean, you're on a flight, you know, every day, going somewhere, constantly, never ends. You know what I mean? That's that part. I think people don't really realize how that constant travel just can drive you kind of crazy.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, you just said it. We still travel, and in the territorial days, example, Florida territory. I use that because it's my territory, my home, everything. It's 2,500 miles a week. I mean, you know, you had 7 days a week. You had a TV, so you wrestled 8 times a week. I mean, you know, I picked my territories that I went to by the mileage. If your territory's too long, I'm not coming. Well, I'm not asking to come. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't a big enough story. I said, hey, anybody want me? No, I mean, Bill Watts wanted me to come out there for a long time. He had actually hooked me and Stan into coming out there and working against the Guerreros a couple times as heels. But, you know, I picked Bill Watts up from the airport when I was just 16 years old. That was what I was doing at the beginning of my life there in wrestling business, was driving the wrestlers around and, you know, taking them to the shows or hotels or whatever and dropping them off. But when I started, and Stan and I were doing really well in Tennessee, we were blessed with some really good characters, and Jerry Jarrett was a genius about how he portrayed the characters and got them over with videos and stuff like that. But Bill would say, "Man, when you come to Oklahoma?" And I said, "Well, when I don't talk to Ted DiBiase and Hacksaw Jim Duggan about going 300 or 400 miles one way and spending the night and spending the night and spending the night," I said, "I like to go drive there and come home, and maybe one night a week have to be out." Of course, one of the things I was going to say, when I was a kid, people said, "What are you going to do when you grow up? What are you going to do when you grow up?" I said, "I don't know, but one thing I want to do is I want to do a job that I don't answer to an alarm clock." I mean, even fishing, I don't know why we got to get up before the fish to go fishing. I ain't figured that part out yet. I think that's a rib in itself. But everybody wants you to be up at 4 o'clock and 3 o'clock. And I said, "Oh, man." And then wrestling was perfect. Perfect. I would usually get up a regular day and when, go to the gym, have lunch, and then drive to a town. But I didn't get up on an alarm clock. I mean, so we were up late and all of that. But when it turned over to the cable and when it turned over to the huge territories and the travel and nothing but travel, it was nothing but alarm clocks. I mean, it was nothing for me and Arn Anderson and Dean Malenko and Fit as agents to get up 4 o'clock in the morning, turn rental cars in, go get an airplane, fly off someplace else, and start the day over again. So that's the hard part. To me, was the hard part. But the fun was gone for me after I stopped the wrestling part and being a talent. The fun was gone. Now all of a sudden it's a business, and now all of a sudden it's a job, and now all of a sudden the pressure's on you. You read in the book, well, when you're sitting there and your match is in the ring, you've wrestled 30 years of your life. You know you wouldn't make the mistakes they're making out there, but they're making mistakes, and you got a guy with big, broad shoulders about 2 people down on a table, and he's going, "Who the hell's match is this?" And I wouldn't answer. Jerry Briscoe was the timekeeper at the time, and Jerry would really stiff elbow me, man. He'd go, "He's talking to you." And I go, "No, I don't want to answer him. I don't want him to know that's my match." Anyway, and the guys are just screwing up. And then when it's over, they come in. He's going, "Hey, good guy, good job, good job." And then you're going, "All right, I've slipped by." And he goes, "Wait a minute. Hey, Steve, come here a minute." We go over there and he cusses me like a dog. What the hell was that? like I got control? I said, at the very beginning, the other agents didn't smarten me up at all. That's what the fun is about the business. Nobody wants to teach you what's good and bad. They want you to fail forward. So I would get cussed on an average of 3 days a week and then get in the car with the agents after that. And go on to the next town. And Arn was always the one that would say, as soon as we got settled in the car and got our seatbelt, he goes, "Okay, who got cussed tonight?" Here I am raising my hand. And they were over it. They'd been cussed so many times, they were over it. But I'd have shell shock. I'm going like, I'm starting to talk like double talk. I mean, the first time Vince got in my face and cussed me like a dog, I was thinking about headbutting him. And I'm going, "What am I doing? This is the guy that's writing the check." But he's really belittling me to a point where it's my manhood's challenged now. And about 4 or 5 things go through my head, and all of a sudden, the good Lord took over on my side and said, "You're absolutely right. Every bit of that was my fault, and I'll do my best to never let that happen again." And then Vince just would turn his head and look at me like my dog does when I'm yelling at him. And he goes, "Well, I guess that's enough." That's all you had to say. And go sit down.
Well, one thing that you mentioned when it came to Vince, and it was like production meetings and stuff. And I mean, what I thought was, okay, so because it's funny because Vince will always tell people he doesn't want yes men. Okay, I don't want yes men. I want people to challenge me.
You're right. You're right.
Okay,
absolutely.
But from your, he would even tell me that I don't want yes men around. So then, but from your thing, I'm seeing like when you're not a yes man, your job's on the line, and he's gonna, it's like if you offer a suggestion, he's gonna like, do the this isn't the 70s anymore. You know what I mean? Or
he's gonna do this. Which one of you guys is smoking pot? I saw him do that a number of times.
Yeah, but it's like it read to me like at first when you're in those meetings and you're speaking your mind, and it was like the worst thing for you to do is speak your mind. And
are you telling me?
And then in time you learn that you just agree with Vince, and that's your job. And then he doesn't want yes men, but he turns everyone into one, or they're gone basically.
Oh yeah, or he makes a fool out of them for coming up with a suggestion. You come up with a suggestion. Here's his deal. Anybody got any input? You raise your hand. I always sat on the front row. The reason I sat on the front row is because I had a hearing deficit and I hadn't submitted to going in and getting hearing aids yet. And when I sat in the back with, Fit and Arn and them, I was missing a lot of what was being said. And when Vince would say something like, okay, you take that, Steve, all right? And I'm going, what? What the hell did he just say? What am I doing? They said, you're walking somebody to the ring. What? No, wait a minute. And so I moved to the front. But the intensity of you trying to come up with something, I mean, John Laurinaitis was the head of talent relations. He was the one that would talk to us afterwards and say, okay, Vince is pissed. None of the agents are giving any suggestions. Said, well, I've had some bad experience giving suggestions if I'm a little gun shy. So, okay, well, you need to give suggestions. So, I would wait and listen, and then every once in a while, I'll give you an idea. I gave a suggestion. This suggestion never happened. But to me, it was brilliant. I mean, I said, why don't we come up with a way to do a 3-dimensional main event at a WrestleMania? And the promotional end of this is they can get their 3D glasses at a sponsor. Let's just pick something like Subway or 7-Eleven or something. Now you've got businesses that are doing the input and everything. They have the 3D glasses, but the promotion for a 3-dimensional wrestling match that made you feel you're right in there taking the action or put it right in your face. I said, I can't tell you how many times in my life as a wrestler, I've had somebody come up to me and say, my grandpa, he used to watch wrestling, but he gets so excited, he'd pick up his cane and go up there and start whacking the TV when the heel was on there getting heat or whatever. I said, just imagine that some grandpa's going to whack the TV and Undertaker's hand comes out through the screen and grabs him by the throat and jerks him back into the thing. I said, I'd watch wrestling, and I've seen everything that could happen in wrestling. They looked at me and they go, where are you? Steve, where are you? And I said, what do you mean? Doesn't that sound good? Doesn't that even have any kind of you got nothing for that? Are you out of your mind? You know how much production that would take? How many cameras? I said, this is the biggest company in the world. One thing about WWE and before that WWF, as a wrestler and as an agent and as an employee and all of that, they were always first class. Everything about them was first class. Hotels, accommodation, travel, everything. I mean, anything we did. We had issues back in the early 90s where we would do things like we had a tug-of-war contest against this bodybuilding thing that he started.
I remember this.
It turned out to be an abortion for the company, but he sent a bunch of heels to Adventure Island, and we had I guess Ric Flair, Kurt Hennig, the Mountie, Mike Rotundo, Ted DiBiase, and Berserker, and they let us go there unaccompanied by an agent to tell us what to do. And they said, guys, we went to the guy and said, what do you want to do? Drop 3 straight? It was 2 out of 3 pulls for the tug of war. We just figured we're heels and, you know, they're trying to get the bodybuilding thing over. You want us to drop 2 straight or 3 straight, or what do you want us to do? The guy looked at us and said, well, I don't think you can beat those guys, so just go ahead and do whatever you want to do. It's on y'all. Well, that didn't do nothing but piss all of us off. And we went out there, and when we did it, I mean, we had fun with it because Kurt was, you know, he was kind of calling the charge there, and we turned loose of the rope. You know, the old trick where you pull real hard and everybody's pulling, then you go, loot, let them go.
Then you let go and they all fall down.
Yeah, and they were all oiled up, and it was in the sand, and they all looked like powdered donuts. We couldn't stop laughing. I mean, you know, it should have been. It should have been. We should have had an authority figure with us. There was no doubt about that. But then we just beat them the next 2 and beat them, and then we'd go, we won, we won. And Vince, boy, he got us all together when we went back to TV. I think it was a Monday Night Raw. We went back on the road, and he goes, he cussed every one of us out. What the hell? I'm trying to start the bodybuilding federation, and you guys beat him in a tug of war contest. And we said, well, that's what the guy said, beat him if you can. So we did. Anyway.
Your 3D idea, I think, is a bit ahead of your time, because with all the virtual reality stuff that we have now, I would imagine we're going to see something with all the new Apple headsets that come out, where you may be able to like kind of get like a front row seat into a wrestling match through this headset. So your idea, I think, is ahead of its time.
Well, I really don't know, but I'm a big fan of 3-dimensional. I mean, you know, I don't just go to every movie want to see 3D or whatever, but you know, I'm mesmerized. I love magic. I mean, you know, look at me. I love magic, wrestling, and roller derby. Anyway, but the magic part and everything. And then so to me, one of Vince's claim to fame is this the first time ever. I want to be the first one to ever do this. So when you're thinking like that, you really got to dig deep for ideas. I mean, you know, so my idea of a 3-dimensional, I bring it up all the time. And it's kind of like a personal thing to me, because if they ever have a 3D dimensional match and they don't give me any credit, I'm gonna be pissed.
You know, you also I was in Vegas last weekend for the convention and then for AEW, and I'm sitting at the table with Brian Alvarez, and he goes, you know what these 2 counts, and immediately I was like, wait, did you read Steve's book? Because he's got a whole bit on Vince only wanting 2 counts. And so we went into this whole back and forth about why you should have 1 counts earlier in the match, and then it builds up the drama for the 2 counts. And then you get that late 2 count kind of leading to the finish. And it like he was and I was like, God, you had to have read Steve's book. He's like, no, I've just been something I've been thinking about. But your chapter, or your couple of pages on Vince only wanting the 2 counts, and kind of where wrestling is with counts, like it's just something that I think a lot of fans probably don't even realize that would work better for some of these matches, where if you had way more variety in the counts.
Well, one thing I want to jump in really quick on this one is it's what's weird to me is how because this is the one thing with me is like, I grew up and we traveled some. I saw a lot of different territories, and then got the VCR very early on and started watching every territory on TV. So I saw like a million different styles of wrestling. But most people now grew up on Vince's wrestling. It's the only wrestling they know. And so like when the New Japan thing started, where they started doing the 1 count kickouts, that got big reactions, because it was like not the norm, something new. It's new, right?
Yeah. Something old new.
People were, what's old is new. People were, I got 2 types of reactions. Like, my reaction was, hey, the people popped. It's really good. And it's different. And I like it. And it's all this. And then it goes, it's like, but the ones who grew up on nothing but 2 counts, they thought it was wrong. It was just wrong. And I mean, even today, like, I'll see people critiquing matches, and they'll do the 1 count kick out spot, which is now kind of familiar because from New Japan and Ishii. And of course, if it works somewhere else, someone's going to copy it here. And they just, because they've only watched WWE, it's like they're cheating. It's not right. You can't be doing this because you grew up and I never saw this when I grew up. So therefore it's wrong. And like, I actually have these arguments with people constantly because of my age, and they'll think something is wrong. And I'll go, I've seen this in Florida. And it's usually Florida too, which is the funny part. It's usually Eddie Graham in Florida. I go, oh, I was 12 years old. I saw this in Florida with Eddie Graham. This isn't like wrong. It was just, they did it all the time, booking things, different styles of booking, and, the way he would do, different people would go over and how they would go over. And sometimes babyface wrestle baby faces and all this stuff that's Vince never did. So these people think it's wrong. And it's like, it was successful in other places, but they never saw it. So it's just wrong,
Yeah, if it isn't on WWF or WWE, this is bullshit. This is wrong.
Yeah.
You're right. But, it's just why I say about, opinions in wrestling. Wrestling is just strictly an opinion, and everybody's got their own opinion, and it's based off of their experience, their witnessing, their, whatever. But is it wrong? No. The reason I am so adamant about 2 counts is the way I was taught. I mean, I wasn't just taught, here's a few moves and you go do it. I mean, it was drilled into me. Eddie Graham was such a stickler for kayfabe. Eddie Graham had psychology at telling you if it was wrong, but he also could tell you why it was wrong. Here's the story on the counts. Our matches used to go an average of 20 to 30 minutes on house shows and live events in territorial days. Now they go an average of 6 minutes on live TV in the comparable. You don't have time to tell a story in 6 minutes. You don't have time to build the story. It has to go boom, 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 over. When you've got 20 or 30 minutes, 7 nights a week, and a different audience, you've got a lot of time from bell to bell. And you're going out there, you can't just rush through moves. And Eddie would say to me, as a babyface, which is where I spent most of my young career as a babyface in Florida and in the Southeast, Georgia and Carolinas, Tennessee, everything. But he'd say, the way that people are going to buy into you as a babyface is that to believe you could take a butt whipping and just keep getting back up. And you can't do it over like doing 1 or 2 moves and then getting a 2 count, because that's almost the end. 1 more count and this match would have been over. I was actually taught to beat the referee on small things. Let's just give an example. Hopefully people listening will understand. 1 tackle, and that's where the guy comes off the ropes and just knocks his opponent down. When the opponent hits the ground, at the beginning of some matches when they're young guys, fast-paced, stuff like that, you tackle and cover you right away just to get a quick cover. If that referee had time to get down and count you, Eddie Graham was going to cuss you out when you came in the dressing room just for the 1 count. He's going, you just got there. You're already slowing down and you're already showing that you're getting damaged. I mean, show some energy. Stay alive. And then when you get to a 2 count, it's got to be towards the end. And after a few devastating things have happened to you, for people to buy into you, they've got to believe that you're kicking out 1, a half of 1, before 1, anything. But the 2 count, that's next to be getting beat. And it should be saved for the biggest drama, which the drama should be at the end. Is he going to win? Is he going to survive? Is the heel going to beat him? Is he going to be my guy? My guy? That's what Vince would call him, the baby faces. Is he going to be my guy? And I'm going to believe in him because he got his arm up at the last second. Well, if he did it after 20 minutes of having his ass handed to him, I believe in him. But if he's doing it at the beginning, then see, the whole psychology of the industry has changed. And here's the deal. Is it wrong? No. Even my friends argue with me to this day. I cover 4 generations of wrestlers. I don't just cover one that I went through. I cover 4 generations, and generation that's a lot of them that are still alive that are my close friends are going, what are they doing? What's the hurry? You know, they're not registering. I'll give you the best example I can give you is take a body part. We always took one body part per night. Don't switch, go from a headlock to an arm, to a leg, to a back. Pick an arm. Take the arm, break the arm down. Keep going back to the arm. No matter what happens, back to an arm drag and get it again. Get the hold again. Get the hold again. Now, when the guy finally gets away from all this guy really needs to remember his arms hurt. And if you watch nowadays, they can just get the crap beat out of them, and then they come to life and like nothing's happened, and nobody ever goes back to any of the parts that were hurt. So that's a kind of a different psychology. But if you really were breaking somebody down, example, you go to throw a punch and it's the arm. Of course, we all know we only work the left arm. So if I throw a left punch, you better duck because I'm not real good with a left. But, you know, if he's got a hard, hurt arm, he goes to throw a punch. Oh, man, my arm. And we used to do this a lot more. And the reason we did this was this is where it hurts. You're telling your audience, this is what's hurting. My arm's hurting. That's all gone. And then, of course, I annihilated the whole thing about the referees. I mean, you know, Vince was, the referees are officials. They are not part of the match. And I've said, hey, Vince, you ever watch wrestling? I mean, you know, let me tell you something. As a wrestler in territorial days, I'd have died without referees a lot of times. A lot of them were ex-wrestlers. A lot of them have been in the business. A lot of them had already wrestled. I mean, already had 3 or 4 matches that night. If you got lost, you could look at a referee. You could be in a reverse chin lock sitting on your butt, totally lost, and say, hey, ref, you got any suggestions? What do I do? Okay, kid, grab his arm, start bending it back, start working your way up. The referee talk you right through it. When I was a heel, I would do stuff with the referee. If I was working with a baby face that really sucked, I mean, just we weren't going nowhere that night, no matter what I did. I'd start messing with the ref. I mean, I'd pull him in a front face lock and hold him down. Referee, check him. When the referee go down under, I'd whack the referee in the back. Referee jump up and I point at the guy, you know, he did it. I mean, there was so much communication between a wrestler and a referee, and the referees were heels a lot of the times. They all needed glasses or whatever. But it was still part of the entertainment of people, what they did. What is our job? Our job is to entertain an audience that's paying for us to be out there. That's the way I see my job. If it's not right, try something else. But give them some entertainment. Don't go, oh, that's an official. I can't mess with him. He's an official. Give me a break. But, you know, the difference between my opinion and Vince's opinion, and he seemed to have done better than I have. So I'd probably go with his opinion if I were you.
Well, one thing, you know, obviously your last big role in wrestling was running FCW, which was the predecessor to the NXT program. You were running the Developmental, which a good percentage of the top guys now were guys that went through your school, that you helped train, that you helped teach.
Right.
And I mean, I thought that it was really fascinating in a lot of ways. You know, it's like you were, I mean, these guys are all in their 20s, and I'm reading about this, and it's kind of like, man, they're behaving like they're like 13-year-olds too much, you know, more than I would have thought. That surprised me about it, in the sense of, you know, the ruining the bathroom stories. You know what I mean? It's like, God, I would think that, you know, you're out of college and you're, you know what I mean? It's like you're not in junior high anymore, and you had to, like, I mean, with all of your other duties, you know, you had to deal with that type of stuff, you know, kind of, you know, and it was disrespect, you know what I mean, to your school and just everything.
Well, I really, you know, I hate to categorize it, but I have to in a way, because it's a different generation. Kids aren't taught the way I was taught. I mean, you know, and I'm not saying one's better than the other. I'm just saying this is the way it is. I'm from a military family. When you said something to if you said something to my dad without yes sir or no sir in it, you knew right away you were in trouble. If you didn't say please and thank you, if I was to go to somebody's house and visit them as a kid, and I walked up and opened their refrigerator, and my dad would have heard about that, I'd have got whooped. I mean, it's just there's a difference in the generations because of the attitudes that come along with it. And one thing about what we do in training athletes is we got a lot of secondary athletes, and we got a lot of college football players. We got pro football players. We got people that already pursued other careers. And some of them had attitudes from pursuing other careers like, that's not my job. That's not my job. I don't have to clean up in this bathroom. I mean, when I'd have to go into the bathroom and knowing this is my building, this is what I'm paying the rent for, I'm in charge, I'm the boss, I'm the owner, I'm everything. It all stops, and I look and there's pee all over the floor, and toilets stopped up, and two plungers sitting right beside them, and everybody's just ignoring everything like, well, not my problem, not my problem. I mean, it was so frustrating, and it seemed so childish to me to have to go in there and tell them. And the only thing I could ever finish with that had some kind of emphasis on them was that, okay, let me give you a scenario. Now you've made it. You're up in the big time. You're WWE. You're in the dressing room. Now you're sitting beside the Undertaker in the dressing room. Now you go into the only stall in that dressing room that has a toilet, and you take a crap and you don't flush the toilet. Undertaker goes in that stall, and he goes, who didn't flush the toilet? Well, I added some words, but I don't want to cuss real bad on your show. I'm kind of gingerbreading this down a little bit because it's really more violent. And when I told it was more violent, because if you'd have been sitting by Skinner, and I wasn't 60 years old, I'm 245 pounds, and I got an attitude, and you tear up the locker room that I've got to share with you, you're not going to last long in there. I'm going to stick the nasty boys on you guys. I mean, there's a way to get around it. But young kids, I mean, a lot of them have never been told no. Well, there's a word for you. No, you can't do that. No, that ain't allowed. No, we don't do that. No, that's not, you ain't doing that. And when you'd see that, and I'd see their faces, I'm going, man, I'm challenged. John Laurinaitis used to threaten me with human resources all the time. Said, you're not in the right generation, Steve. We have a human resources, don't you? And I go, yeah, but you know what the problem with that is? And he goes, what? I said, everything's in my name. I was a sole owner. Everything, they really did it for liability. It's not like I was paying for it or anything. Don't get me wrong. But all the liability was on Steve Kern Inc. And so if you wanted to say something to human resources, if you want to call up at Stanford and complain to human resources that I made you wipe your ass and flush it down the toilet, well, you just go right ahead, okay? Because if they're going to get rid of me after this many years because that I'm scolding you guys, then they may as well just call me today. I'm ready to go. I mean, when it came time for my end, for both of you, to be honest, I was so burnt out. I was so, just at the end of my rope, trying to keep that thing and trying to make sure everybody made millions of dollars that got out of there and all of the different things and all the trainers, keeping them happy and all the talent and trying to run live events. That when they finally said, well, we want to move it over to Orlando and change the name to NXT, and we want you to come over there, and Dusty and everybody, we just all move over there smooth, and we'll start a whole new thing. And I go, bye. I said, I'm not moving to Orlando. There's two cities in Florida I won't live in, Miami and Orlando. And said, well, name your job. Name whatever you want to be. Well, I wanted to be unemployed. I mean, I was done. I was burnt out. I mean, there's a lot more that comes with running something like that, especially when it's dealing with kids' futures. I was so heartbroken when talent would call me on the phone at night and say, I just got cut. Coach, what'd I do wrong? They just cut me. I don't know what you did wrong. Nobody said anything to me. I mean, they didn't call me every time they would release somebody. And some of my friends' kids got released. And then who do you think they're going to call? Who do you think Jerry Briscoe calls or Ricky Steamboat calls or Barry Darso calls when their boys are released? They call me first. Man, what happened? What's wrong with my kid? How come he didn't make it? What's going on? I thought he was doing good. I don't know, man. They just released him, you know? And then listening to young people crying on the phone. I'm a very compassionate person. I don't know if it's a weakness or a strength. I look at it as a strength, but I can watch a Publix commercial at Thanksgiving and start bawling my eyes out. I mean, you know, so you call me and you're a young person and your whole life is over because you're not going to make it and all of this. Well, I'm gonna mourn with you, but I'm gonna try to tell you, if you really want this bad enough, you can continue. You'll find a spot. It's called passion. And if you got the real passion, I said, you know how many territories I've been fired from? I mean, you know, I just kept moving. And then sometimes on the move, I change faces. I go, well, that Steve Keirn look wasn't doing too good back there in the Carolinas. Let's go with the beard this time. I think I'm going to bleach my hair. Let's see what I felt like I became the Lon Chaney Jr. of wrestling after a while. When everything wasn't going right, I just changed faces. So if you really want to do it, I did. I wanted it to be my life. I didn't have anything else. I didn't have a backup plan. I've got a 2-year college education at a community college in Clearwater Beach. And I think they just gave it to me to get me out of there. Anyway, but, you know, I've never shown my college education to anybody. And then, I mean, you know, I've lived and breathed this business my whole life, and this is all I know. And it's changing. It's really changing. To be honest, I'm a dinosaur now. When they invited me to Royal Rumble this year, I went over there. Of course, the talent is super, super respectful, super friendly, super nice. Even Triple H come running and hug me, and I'm going, uh-oh, what's up? I mean, you know, when people are too friendly, you're going, uh-oh, something's happening here. But they were just all being nice and everything. But as I watched the setups and as I watched them preparing for the matches and as I watched the agents doing their job that I had done before, I saw some major changes. And I just kind of go, the business is a big wheel. It's constantly going forward. I mean, you know, like I said earlier, my friends complained of what I taught the young people. They said, you teach them that? I said, no. That Tom Pritchard taught them that. I mean, you know, maybe Norman Smiley. I would have never taught him that, you know. But at the same time, you can't really take credit, I mean, for individual talent. You'll never hear me say I'm the guy that trained Roman Reigns. You might hear me say I'm one of the guys that helped give him some input and tried to guide him. But you really learn the business when you become a full-time worker, and you learn it on your own because nobody really helps you. They just kind of say, if they go, a lot of times you go, hey, watch my match. And when I come back, tell me what you thought. And you come back and they're sitting in the catering and you go, did you watch my match? He says, nah, I watched part of it. No, what'd you think? He says, it's all right. I mean, you know, that was a lot of help. I mean, you know, so you just, it's a unique industry and I have nothing bad to say about it. I loved my business and I was smart enough to accept it. I mean, I got people saying to me right now, and this is the best ones, the Nasty Boys. The Nasty Boys live here in Tampa Bay area. And I'm seeing Knobs on his internet, Facebook, complaining about not being in the Hall of Fame. And he's going, man, he's trying so hard. That's his dream, to be in the Hall of Fame. And so I called him up and says, hey, Knobs, I just wanted to smarten you up. He goes, what do you mean? I said, you know, it's work, right? And he goes, what? And I said, it's a work. The wrestling business is a work. Don't let things bother you. if it wasn't meant to be, it's not meant to be. I mean, I held over 50 titles in territorial days in all these different territories, and I never held a title in WWE WWF when I was Skinner or when I wrestled Doink. And people say, well, you never won a title. And I said, I never won one, even though I had 50. I never won any of them either. I was told to go over that night. And I said the same thing happened when I lost it. I was told to let somebody else wear it for a while. I said, I understand the business. I don't understand it as an ego, and I'm feeding my ego. I did more jobs than I did go-overs if I was to look at my history and my career. I probably got beat more times than I won, but I still got paid. And what I look at is the end results. I've got two beautiful children, a son and a daughter. My son's a doctor. I put my son through college, 8 years working in WWF and WWE. I put my daughter through college. They didn't have any loan debts or anything. The business paid for my kids to go to school by having given me a job. So, it owes me nothing, zero. Whatever I got out of it is my life enjoyment and my memories. And I've got some fantastic, I just told a friend today that I forgot one of the things in my first book I should have told was the story about being on Thunder in Paradise. When I might have been in the second book because it was actually WCW years after WWF. So I guess it would have had to have been in the second book, but Hogan had me on Thunder in Paradise in an episode, and I forgot all about that. That was a real nightmare to be on a TV show. But anyway, so lots of things to talk about, a lot of things in the book that hopefully are interesting. It's like when you complimented, you made me feel so good that you were interested in it and some of the things you were interested in. And I was already saying to Ian, who's going to be interested in some of this backstage stuff?
Actually, I was really interested in that part of the other one that you talked about, and this is when you're running Developmental.
Right.
And I remember when they hired Jane Geddes and Canyon Seaman. Canyon Seaman played volleyball here, so yeah. I actually knew of him from the volleyball, community and stuff. And I remember when he was hired, and it was for a major role. And I was like, okay, he was a really, really good volleyball player and went to Stanford, so probably pretty intelligent.
Right.
And it's like, but professional wrestling is like this weird, unique business, as you know. If you do not study pro wrestling, I mean, for years and years and maybe decades, and not, it's like how can you, evaluate it? How can you, what I mean? It's like, it's just so unique. It's not like a sport. It's not even like a television show. And it's like, like I could see people, administrators, people who are making building deals and things like this, but he was involved with talent, involved with you and things like that. And it's like,
oh, yeah.
And it's like, I just thought like, I just thought it's not the right fit. And he was there for several years. And then one day he was gone. I was reading about the thing and you kind of mentioned it. One day he was gone. And I remember that one day, something happened that was bad. I forgot the exact story. And he ended up taking the blame and he was gone. But it was like, and I would see him on different shows kind of explaining what they're looking for in talent. And it was just like, those are really nice corporate words, but it's just like, those are corporate words. I mean, I never felt that, he fully understood because he didn't grow up watching it. And it's not even growing up watching it. He just wasn't around it. It was from a different world.
No, one of the things I've always preached to the people that I've taught in the industry, I have much more success with either second generation wrestlers or people that were wrestling fans all their life wanting to wrestle, because if they get it and they've all they have to do is have the dots connected and then they're in the business. But people that don't, I mean, if I could tell you how many people that came through FCW that didn't know anybody before John Cena, and I'd say, watch some old films. And they go, what, like of John Cena? And I go, no, go back. Go back before John Cena's even born, okay? Oh, was there a wrestling before John Cena? I'm going, man. I mean, like you said, you have you've set yourself apart in this wrestling business with your life that you understand because of the experiences and all the research you've done and all the people you've talked to. Some of them just walk in the front door and say, I want to be a wrestler. And they're like 30 something years old. And they're going like, no, I never watched it. But I mean, I was going to be a brain surgeon, but I flunked out of college. So I thought, well, wrestler would be a good choice next. So anyway, but yeah, it's a lot more than it looks. But the problem is it's so diluted to me now that I'm getting, I said earlier at the beginning of this, I'm getting, my friends are ribbing me and they're constantly sending me these videos, of people just dying in the ring. I mean, I just watched a black kid do a backflip to land on somebody and he landed directly on top of his head. The guy handled it right that he was working with. He just got down and just kind of covered him because he knew he was probably dead. And out of an instinct, the kid kicked a leg on the 2 count and then laid there, but he knew he was still dead. So he covered him for the 1, 2, 3. But it was so devastating the way he landed on his head from that high risk move. I mean, I get these videos all day long of all this stuff. And it's just like, I have been invited to a lot of indie shows and things. And then, if it's something important like Brian Adams' son is breaking in down here, and he's been working. Royce is his name, and I really liked Brian. And after he passed away, I missed him, and he's a good guy. And when his son got old enough, I mean, if he asked me and say, "Would you mind come watching me and give me advice?" I'll go at a drop of a hat. But most of the time, I don't watch. I don't go. And it's not because it's not good. It's just that it's not as interesting to me now. I mean, I don't find any kind of thrill out of it or excitement. When we went to Royal Rumble, they were super nice, but it was in a baseball stadium in St. Petersburg, and it's called the Tropicana, and they put myself and Hogan and Brian Blair and Dory Funk and Jerry Briscoe and Barry Windham and Mike Rotundo all in a suite to watch Royal Rumble. Holy crap, that was so far away. I needed a pair of binoculars just to see the damn ring. I mean, I was watching the monitor and I should have just been at home for that. And then my family, I got, my son has 2 kids and him and his 2 kids and wife, and my daughter and her 3 kids, they're all sitting out in the audience. They gave them tickets to go see it too. I mean, my grandkids like it. And they sat on the floor, but they were so far back, they couldn't see over the people in front of them. It's really, I said, this is probably why I'm not interested in ever going to a Super Bowl or anything else. I mean, I'd rather watch it at home where you got a big screen, nobody's standing up in front of you. You get to see it, you get to hear the commentators, the whole deal. I mean, I'd be a horrible promoter for live events if they turned me loose. I'd go, stay home. You don't have to pay for parking in your driveway.
And you won't be able to see it in 3D when we finally get 3D wrestling.
Man, if they get 3D, they're gonna be hearing from me left and right. Nah, they want. Michael Hayes, I think, is the only one left from those meetings that I was in, so he would be the one that would come up with. Didn't Keirn suggest that back in, 2000?
So, I want to thank you for doing this, and obviously, your co-author Ian Douglas, who you mentioned, I like Ian a lot.
He's awesome, man.
He told me to say hi to Dave as well.
He does a great job with his books.
He does.
I mean, he'll take what you have and then he'll like paint the picture, and he understands the business. He understands the key is he understands the history of the business. So like when you talk to him about certain things, like he'll know basically what you're talking about as opposed to someone who's a writer and he's trying to like figure out wrestling at the same time. And you can see the difference in his writing with wrestlers and other people's writing with wrestlers, and also I think his ability to write it in a way that will entertain and he writes it for wrestling fans, as and I think
the secret
really
is,
yeah.
To me, the secret is he's a wrestling fan.
Yeah. And yeah,
He,
without a doubt.
but he's way past the fan thing. He's like you guys. He's way past just being a fan thing. He's really onto the inside. He's really onto. He's written 5 other books. I mean, he wrote the Bohemian Rhapsody, which is a story about the history of wrestling in the Bahamas. And if you're a real avid wrestling fan, you'd want to read about that. It's a totally different world. You're in a third world country over there. I mean, when you're doing the wrestling, and I wrestled in the Bahamas a lot. I actually wrote the foreword for that book, but he wrote Brian Blair's book, Bugsy McGraw's book, Hornswoggle's book, some shooter. What was the guy's name? Dan Severin.
Mm-hmm.
Was Dan a shooter?
Oh yeah. He was he was amateur.
Yeah, that was the one, a shooter, and I think he's working on a book for Mike Rotundo now.
Wow.
Yeah. So he's and I can't say enough good things about Ian, but at the same time, he took. If you would have listened to our conversations on a Wednesday night for 2 hours, and he's asking me a few things, and plus I'm feeding him a lot of the things I wanted told, and he's coordinating all of it. And then when he sent me the rough draft and he said, read this and see what he said, and I'm reading it and I'm going, ooh, can't say that. I can't say that. Uh-oh, better not say that. Can I say queer? Uh-oh, can't say that. I mean, it was like my hands were tied. And then I really wanted to really make people understand that there's no difference between wrestlers and real people. It's just that, they're just like stars that have been presented and been promoted and pushed, and then they get to another level, but they're really just people. We're all just people, man. And I'm a Christian, and, I really stress that part of it because you really need a faith to get you through something as strong as this. If you didn't have faith, if I told you guys how many times I prayed, I mean, I got to the point where I was repeating Philippians 4:13 when I was walking to the ring, and that's, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And I just said it over and over and over and over and over and over again. And then I'd walk out and I wasn't hurt. And then I was good. But right now I'm around, we got at least 40 guys here in Tampa that are retired, and we get together and eat lunch once a month. And as many can show up. And there's so many guys on canes. I mean, they're crippled. They're, they've had back surgeries, and I'm no different. I've had my hips replaced, but I'm blessed by God because I'm not, confined to a wheelchair, and I'm not disabled. I mean, the only thing I keep telling my wife is, if you notice I'm going crazy, smart me up, will you? I mean, because I have had some friends, and this is not in a negative way, it's just this is part of life, but I've had some friends that I've seen deteriorate mentally.
Oh, yeah.
And it scares me. And this is what scares me. It scares me and my family, The wrestling fans and the wrestling world away. Now it's just your immediate family, and now you got Steve Kern here that is in the business all his life, and now he can't put 2 words together, or he don't know what day it is or whatever. And I'll give you an example. Harley Race is one of my biggest mentors. I mean, I would do anything for Harley, and I might have wrote it in my first book when Harley made me do a few things I shouldn't have done, but he had me do them anyway. But when I saw him one time, he's in a wheelchair, and I was at a convention, and I walked, hey, Harley, how's it going? He looked at me like I was a total stranger.
Oh, wow. Oh.
And he goes, do I know you?
Oh, geez.
And man, I just started crying. I mean, and I wasn't an ugly ball face cry like I do if my dad was coming home from being a POW. It was more like just kind of like a sympathy thing, but I couldn't get the tears to stop running out of my eyes. And he just had that far away look in his face. And when I'd call Terry Funk, and Terry Funk would talk to me so plain and everything for a little while, and then we'd start repeating everything we had just talked about, and I'm
at
going,
the very
man.
end, yeah.
And it hurt a lot. And then
Yeah.
one of the ones that hurt the worst was Paul Orndorff. Paul's from Brandon. I was a part of Paul breaking into this business. I mean, I was one of his mentors that he would ride with me. And I mean, really quick, funny story about Paul. When he first started, he was supposed to go over the first 3 nights he worked, and he tried that 2 count and didn't kick out for the 3. He got pinned 3 nights in a row that he was supposed to go over. The referee had to just go ahead and count him out. And he keeps going, man, I keep forgetting to kick out. I keep forgetting. I said, Paul, you got to get that part down, bro. you got to kick out on 2, not 3. So anyway, but great guy, great man. I mean, I ribbed him a lot. I ribbed Paul Orndorff a lot, but I could get away with it because he would have killed anybody that did the things I did to him. If it was a normal person, he'd have killed them. But he laughed when I'd do it. So, I mean, I ribbed Haku.
Wow.
Haku. Now you guys know this, but when he was Prince Tonga, and I was like the stud here in Florida, he shows up. He's 19. He's just a kid. Couldn't have weighed $190. Naive. Had a gym bag that zipped up like this around when it zipped up like that. I mean, I put a live armadillo in his bag. I was notorious about in Florida. We got these open roads getting to one coast to the other. And if I saw something run across the road, I got out and run it down. I mean, armadillo, snake. I come to the dressing room with a snake or an armadillo almost 2 or 3 times a week just to come in and lob it on somebody to zip their reaction, So when I put the armadillo in his bag, if you ever have him on the show, ask him. He'll tell you. But he still loved me. Whenever I go, I'm glad you could take a joke.
So the book, I will put links to both of the books in the show notes.
Thank you guys so much for that.
And any last plugs? Any last thoughts about the book and why people should pick it up?
Well, it's hard for me, and I hope you understand this. It's hard for me to try to sell something. I never was good at selling things. I mean, in the ring, I could sell stuff because usually guys are stiff enough to make me sell. But the idea is I always felt like, I mean, I talked about a transition into real estate, and I always felt like it was, I'm trying to sell this guy a house or these people a house. This is a big investment, and I don't even like the house, So the book is interesting, in my opinion, and it's just my opinion. The book is interesting if you're a fan and you want to know more about wrestling. But it's the transition from territorial days into the cable days. But it covers a lot of facets of wrestling that aren't seen. It's not just the normal wrestling story. And my life wasn't the normal wrestler story either. I mean, from my background of being a military kid, and I mean, I know Shawn Michaels' dad was in the military too. But at the same time, I mean, a prisoner of war for 7.5 years. 2 wars. Yeah. 7.5 years, though, from the time I was 13 to 21, he was a POW in Vietnam. So I was trying to learn to be a man on my own. And that was one of the things that the colonel told me when he came out and told me that my dad was shot down in Vietnam. He told me he was dead. Very first day, he said, your dad died today. And I told me I had to be a man of my family. I was the only man in the family now. You're the man. I'm 13. No, you're the man. Well, what does that mean? You'll figure it out. Well, I mean, this is why my faith is so strong. My faith is so strong because I got to an age where I reflected back in my life and saw how I got where I'm at and how blessed I am to be here and how blessed I am to know guys like you guys that are helping me out with trying to sell a couple books and, interested enough to talk to me for a short time and kind of entertain an old timer because I've got a lot to tell and I got a lot of stories, but at the same time, not everybody wants to hear them. So I remember Eddie Graham used to tell me the same damn story over and over and over. And then when we'd be out to eat, somebody come up and he start telling them that story again and again and again. And I got tired of trying to make my face look like, oh yeah, that's a good one. Oh, yeah, that's a good one. Oh, that's a good one. So I try to watch my conversation, keep them limited. But I can't tell you how much I appreciate this opportunity to have me on and everything. And How grateful I really am.
Well, the books are on Amazon. They're on other places as well if you just search for them. And like I said, we'll have them in the show notes. Steve, it's been awesome. The last 2 interviews that we've done with you have been super entertaining, and I've really appreciated
thank you guys.
to talk to you.
And thanks for the book. Thanks for the book, because the book, especially the second book. I mean, the first book was interesting to me because I'm so interested in territories anyway, and you went through all your territories. But the second one, is the second book focuses far more on modern and a lot of, training WWE, the backstage of WWE, Vince McMahon, and I found that very. It was just interesting to see, your thoughts, and even your thoughts on changes in wrestling, and wrestling always changes. I mean, that's just reality. It does, sometimes for the good, sometimes for the bad. But and
that's opinionated.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree with you, but you'll find people that'll say, no, it's all good now. So okay, well, you must not have seen it before. I mean,
yeah. I mean, there's no way. This is what I'll say. There are some very good talkers, really good talkers now, but there is no way that the talkers are as good because it's too scripted. And it doesn't feel as real. The talking is not as good, even though, like, again, there's some phenomenal talkers now. The wrestling in the ring it's different. I mean, some guys are absolutely phenomenal. I can enjoy it for what it is. Sometimes, there's I like just this last week, I think that there's a lot of excesses. They do they find something good and then they do it to death as opposed to keep it special. That's what I will say. And I think that's the thing that right now they need to guard against, because what used to be super special and spectacular is becoming too normal, and then they keep trying to top it, and that's where we get the injury rate thing. And that's the other thing is guys do get hurt more now, and it's a work, and because it's a work, there's always going to be guys getting hurt. It's always, but the idea is, keep it safe, and I always like. Protect your head and neck is, you know what I mean? That's my thought. Just there's nothing.
I agree 100%. I mean, there's too many high risk moves that are just wasted movement. I mean, if you had a moonsault off the top in the first 3 or 4 matches, and there's nothing to look forward to in the main event. I mean, it used to be. I mean, we had to regulate in our own dressing rooms in the territorial days, and I was taught by Eddie Graham, who drilled me and probably brainwashed me, but don't let nobody steal your shit. And if they do, confront them. I had that move first. Now you're trying to use it all the time. That's my move. I made that move. Whatever. I mean, that's my finish. I used a sleeper hold for years, and Eddie Graham said, you ever see anybody go for the sleeper in a high spot before your match? You call them out. He said, it's like the figure 4. Us and the Briscoes use the figure 4, nobody else. And I mean, that was just the difference in an era. I mean, nowadays, finishing moves are high spots. They do pile drivers on stairs and everywhere, and those were kind of carry me out in an ambulance moves. But it's, it is what it is. And you don't complain, you just enjoy it. I mean, it's what it's for. It's entertainment, and it's to be enjoyed. And even if it's controversial where you didn't like it or it really sucked, you're still enjoying it because now you're saying you're the expert. That guy sucked. I could have killed him, But the thing about it is it's still going forward, and to me, there's just no end. I mean, with them spreading out, and with them now, they've joined forces with TKO, and I mean, you don't know what the end of this is going to be or the limits, and it's like I sit back and go, wow, who knows where the business is going or how big it's going to get, but. I mean, it's going to continue. It's one of the first things that was ever on TV, and probably be one of the last things on TV too.
Yeah. All right. The book, The Keirn Chronicles Volume 2, The Phenomenal Wrestling Resurgence of Steve Keirn. Thanks again, Steve. It's been a blast, and good luck with the sales of the book.
Well, thank you all so much, and I know it'll help, and I appreciate it. I can't tell you how much, and God bless you both.
All right, take care.
Take care.
All right, see ya.
All right, Dave. I have to go to a wrestling show later tonight, so I don't have a ton of time to finish up here. But we'll get through a couple of subjects. The Observer came out this morning.
A lot of stuff in this one.
A lot of stuff in the Observer. Update folks on what the Janelle Grant lawsuit update is going on.
Yeah, so the lawsuit is on hold. What happened is the government, the Southern District of New York, which is interesting to me, just because of venue. They are investigating Vince McMahon and investigating the things in some of the things in the lawsuit, and for reasons having to do with discovery and stuff, they pretty much ask that everything that they do in the lawsuit be put on hold so they can concentrate on the investigation. And it's not an unusual procedure, from what I understand, having talked to a lot of people. Eric Anderson actually kind of just describes it in the Observer, who's an attorney friend of ours. And, so it's just one of those things. So it's probably 6 months and then it will go back. But right now, it's not good news for Vince McMahon, because for them to do this, that means that they're very seriously looking at him. So yeah, it's not a guarantee he's going to get indicted or anything like that. I mean, you just have to look at it like it's a process. But for the people who thought that there's no chance he was going to get indicted, that's wrong, because if there was no chance, this would not happen. Mm-hmm. So they are absolutely looking into him. The Southern District of New York is interesting to me because so much of this is venue, and Connecticut would be the venue of this stuff, especially with Janelle Grant. It was all Connecticut. It wasn't Southern District of New York. Because I remember in Vince's trial, one of the key things, which was the distribution of steroids to Hulk Hogan, they could not prove that anything happened. That was in the Eastern District of New York on Long Island. They could not prove, or they didn't even have a case that Vince distributed to Hogan within that district. They could have put it in Connecticut. They could have made a case for Connecticut, but Connecticut didn't, for whatever reasons, Connecticut didn't feel like following up on it, and it never went anywhere. I mean, it was never ruled that he never did it. He was never acquitted of it. It was that they did not have the correct venue for that. And that's why it's like the Southern District of New York is interesting to me, only because I don't know that the venue aspect of it, but they must. I know some people are going like, this district has a great conviction rate, and they do. But I also remember the Eastern District, when Vince was on trial in '94, they had a great conviction rate. And, I saw the trial, and I, probably one of the experts on that trial now. And, when it was over, it was like, I just thought it was such a weak case, to go as far as it did. There was a case to get to here, but there was not a case to get to here, which is the conviction. And that's why, like, when I watched that trial, it was like, they had a lot of evidence of that Vince was not a good guy, and they had a lot of evidence that steroids were in WWE, of course, because they were all over the place. But they did not have the evidence of the conspiracy. They almost did, but almost isn't a conviction. And so, to me, I was, that's why, again, like, everything's a process. But I mean, as far as like the ruling on the what's it called? The ruling on the arbitration thing. That's on hold now. I mean, nothing's going to happen for 6 months when it comes to that, whether it's going to have to go to arbitration. When this investigation is over, if they decide to press charges, if they have evidence, it's immaterial at that point what's going to happen, other than Janelle Grant, it strengthens her case if they have something. If they don't have anything, then it doesn't strengthen her case. But that ruling, which was going to be the next step, I mean, that's on hold for 6 months. And news, like these back and forth things that like Vince's side and her side put out, that's also on hold for 6 months. We're not going to get any information on this story of any great note until either this investigation is over, or one day we wake up and there's an announcement and there's charges. So that's the story.
6 months takes us right to the end of the year.
Yeah.
Just a reminder for folks watching this live, this is a free preview. We did not put this one behind the video paywall. We put this one on the free YouTube channel. So if this is a little bit of a preview to what Dave and I do every Friday. So if you like what you see, video.f4wonline.com is how you become a live subscriber. And folks who are listening, if you want to check out the video version, it is on the free YouTube channel as well. All right, let's talk about the, I guess before the AEW TV rights stuff that you wrote about, what's the deal with all these contracts coming up for WWE?
Just look, there's like 200 people, maybe 100 or so on their main roster. That means 20 a year. So we're just hearing more about it. But yeah, usually they were more proactive about it as far as getting people signed further ahead of time. Especially a few years ago when I think that, a lot of people saw AEW as a better place to be. Now it's not, I don't think people there see it as much, so they're not as proactive about it. But just, yeah, I mean, contracts are coming due and, I know Tony Khan's still interested in signing people. How many and whatever is going to depend on when they get that deal signed. If they get the deal signed at a good number, there will be more aggressive signing of talent. That's inherent. That's what's going to happen. If it's not as good a number, there will be less aggressive when it comes to signing WWE talent. And, you also have to, there's so many things if you're AEW and you're signing WWE talent, because, a lot of them, were mistakes in hindsight, people who he spent a lot of money on that didn't get a lot of value. And then others were fantastic, for the company.
That's how it is in all sports, though.
It's exactly like that.
Yeah.
You don't know the attitude when you change teams. That's one of the things now is that the perception in WWE is that, hey, it's not a bad place to work. The money's good. The schedule's not as hard as it used to be. And the creative is not as bad as it used to be. Whereas, before, when all those things were different, AEW was fresh and guys were having a ball there. And, there was more fear of people going. And also when the gap was closer, the last thing you wanted was people going. Right now, obviously the gap is very, very big. There's nothing that AEW can do where they're going to beat WWE ratings. And that wasn't the case a couple of years ago. So the impetus of signing people long before they expire, and the idea, plus Cody Rhodes is there and stuff. That makes a big difference too. Guys go the other way and have been more successful going the other way. So it's the dynamic is always changing, but I don't think they're as pressed to sign people a year before their deal is up like they probably were 2 years ago.
The AEW TV rights deal, you had a big story in the Observer. I think I'd sent you the Matt Bellamy thing. What was it? Late Thursday.
Yeah.
Or no, last week. It was earlier this week. It was like Sunday night or Monday night or something.
Yeah. Because I wrote all that in the Justin Barrasso thing, which is from the weekend, and then talking to a bunch of other people in the last week or so, and it's there. I consider it good. Number one, it's very clear that WBD wants AEW. Now it's just a question of the price that they are going to pay and AEW is going to accept. And perhaps a couple weeks from now, if they're going to open it up to other people and see what else is out there. So
what is also out there?
We don't know, because legally nobody can talk. But I would say, you would think with the ratings that Dynamite gets, and even Rampage for that matter, I think that not Rampage, Collision. Rampage's ratings are not particularly great. Collision ratings are on a Saturday night are pretty good. They were, what were they? They were 6th on Saturday, and and if you take away the playoffs, they were higher than that. So those two shows are generally pretty successful. You would think any station, with the possible exception of ESPN, which also would be the most valuable station for them, would want them. You would think any one of these people would want them. It's just a question of how much they would want to pay for what it's delivered and what's the best thing for AEW, because AEW doesn't want to lose exposure. You have to pick money and exposure, but you want the best of both. You want the most money, but you also want the most exposure. A lot of money and limited exposure isn't good because you're trying to build popularity. The nature of the beast is that a lot of exposure and no money, which used to be, probably the optimum for wrestling because there wasn't money in wrestling. That's no longer the case. I mean, because it's this money. This money is going to make or break. I mean, I don't say make or break them, but profitability wise, it will make or break them. I mean, literally, we are going to know, after 5 years of people, saying so many things about AEW, both positive and negative and all of that. And it's that, like, these discussions that are so annoying sometimes, because there's so much ignorance is involved in them. I'm not saying what's going to happen, but what I am saying is that these discussions probably will be gone. They won't be completely gone, of course, but a lot of the viable arguments will be gone very soon. And again, like we've said, week after week after week, this isn't the best time for AEW to be at a low point ratings wise. If they were at the numbers they were at before, but again, all of that's the reality of all of television, except for NFL and WWE. I mean, and NHL actually was pretty similar this year to last year, and WNBA, of course, is way higher. But I mean, regular television shows are all way down.
Yeah,
way down. They're down more than AEW is. So, I mean, if you look at, again, like every week when I do the standings, and I always put in what they were doing a year ago. And a year ago, the numbers were higher, but they were lower in the standings. And that alone should, like, to me, tell people that, like, oh, they're down 10% from last year or 11% from last year. And it's like, what about everyone else? I mean, that's how you understand the business, is what everyone's doing. Or, the most ignorant is the stuff of, oh, in 1999, there were blah, 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 blah. Whenever I read that, it's like, well, you don't know television at all, because the world has changed. It's not 1999. And if this product was in 1999, the reality is the ratings would be through the roof, would be millions and millions, because that's how many people watched the limited fare that they had and watched pro wrestling. Because, I mean, who's to say where it would be, but it would be ridiculously higher than it is now. And it would be harder for them to make it work, because the TV money, the TV money is the thing now, which before nobody was running a promotion on TV money. And now WWE has been, UFC is, and AEW is trying to, and either will or will not be able to be extremely profitable, largely through TV money, regardless of how many tickets they sold in Los Angeles or Palm Desert or whatever on these shows. Because, yeah, attendance isn't good, and there's no excuse for it. It just isn't. And there's reasons, but we're I don't want to say we're in the home stretch, but a lot of the fears that people have, I think are when WWE did not go on WBD, and there were talks. Once that did not happen, I thought, okay, the worst case scenario, the most feared scenario for AEW, did not happen. And so they're okay. Will they be super profitable? I don't know. There's so many moving parts. This NBA thing, still has to get settled. These talks are going on, but the money they're talking about is, it may not be exactly what Tony Khan wants, but I mean, to say, he's disappointed, it's a weird word. I will just say that at the numbers that they started with, I would not be disappointed in those numbers. So I think that I think they're okay. Are they going to be printing money? That I don't know. But we will know that by, soon enough. We'll know.
And they are also allowing some contracts to lapse on there. And I saw Mark Henry. There was Jake Hager,
Arn Anderson. There'll probably be more. I mean, if you're not being used on television, there's because they're a television product. If you're not being used on television, there's no need to have you. Now with Arn, obviously Cody Rhodes' statement, like just 1 week ago, about the idea that he wants a manager, and then Arn, the thing happening with Arn with his contract expiring, it makes me think that, again, I don't know that, Arn hadn't been on TV in a long, long time. But I don't even know that necessarily means he was cut as much as, hey, my contract's up and Cody wants me. We'll find that out in the next, 3 months if he's or whatever it is.
The one person who doesn't need a manager is Cody Rhodes.
Yeah. But,
unless Arn's there to create some sympathy when the bloodline attacks again or something.
There's things that you can do. And Cody said he wants it and all that. I mean, if he doesn't go there, then Arn, whatever. I mean, it's, we'll see what happens with Arn. We'll see what happens with all of them, and on both sides, there's cuts. There should be cuts. There's been a lot of cuts in WWE as well. I mean, you're not going to keep adding and adding and adding talent without cuts. That's just the reality of any business, like this.
All right. Let's see. I guess just thoughts on the Dynamite rating, and then you had a nugget on the early buy rate numbers for the pay-per-view.
I mean, I do want to say the NXT rating was phenomenal, and what
do you credit it?
That's a very good question. I've even asked people there that, and they haven't gotten back to me. So I don't think
I talked to somebody. Actually, I was talking to Paul Fontaine, and he said he thought Sexy Red being on the show was part of it.
That was the one that more people than not. No one in WWE's told me that, but more people than not, when it comes to that, use that because it really was a big boost from normal. So it's not like, hey, the storylines or something, because the boost was really big. And look, we'll know that in 2 weeks because if she's not there and then rating goes back to normal, we can look there and go like, hey, it's like when Shaq was on, you know what I mean? Or Tyson, it's like, yeah, those are really good numbers. And then you go back to normal. So we'll know about Sexy Red probably when Tuesday's ratings come out. But it was a great one. They almost beat AEW. I mean, AEW, the thing, I really looked at that stuff close. So the key to that rating was that under 35 is still weak. Over 35 is good. They were up, up to a good level. That's where the viewer increase was high, and a lot of that was over 50s. So the older viewers because the key to Wednesday was there was no NBA. And so what happened was a lot of older viewers came back. The younger viewers still, it's a little above what it was 2 weeks ago, but it was below what it was last week. So the younger viewers are still not coming back. And, the NHL was still on. They had a good rating and everything like that. But the NHL is not doing it's not hurting like the NBA rating would. And I mean, the NXT number, I mean, they went against a big NBA game, and AEW lucked out that the Celtics swept, or else I think that their number would be considerably lower than it was. So NXT would have won if AEW was going against the NBA. But, if it's just because of Sexy Red, then it's a 1 week fluke and it doesn't really necessarily mean anything. But, that's what time will tell. I mean, I wouldn't call it a bad number. It was up, but this is kind of where AEW is at right now. The key now is, I mean, it's a hard one. It's like, I can go in here and say, well, they've got these new people and they got to start getting them over. And that's true. But there's also a reality of people have figured out, when you're fighting for first and you're arguing over first and arguing over who's the best, your numbers are going to be at one thing. And when everyone has decided this is the best and I got this many hours a week of free time, the number two is going to start getting hurt. And that's what happened. The good thing is that it appears that number two is a viable business, and that's, that's really all, on day one, when they started, that's all they were looking for. It's like when AEW started, I don't believe that any of these guys thought we are going to beat WWE. I don't think any of them thought that. It was like, can we make a viable business that is sustainable and eventually makes money? And we very well may very well, that's success or failure. And like I said, like the success is going to be determined, this year and relatively soon. And it's not beating WWE, and it's not, like the TV ratings are down and the attendance is down, and it would be better to be better, of course. But a lot of that, a lot of that is WWE got good, or got more interesting to more people. And, you're not beating them in New York, and you're not beating them in Chicago. And that was happening. And it ain't happening anymore. You're not beating them in LA either, which, at one point they were doing very well in those markets. So this is just kind of where it is, but it's a viable business and a sustainable business. Probably, I mean, we'll know for sure very soon. And that's what it was supposed to be. I mean, the idea that when Punk came there and they came close, when this thing started, it was not about beating Raw. Nobody ever said that. It wasn't even about beating NXT. It was about running good pay-per-views and running good live shows and running good TVs, entertaining people, and eventually making money. And whether that's a success or failure, and there's been 5 years of talk, our answer's coming, one way or the other. And, I mean, it's written a whole lot about it. Doesn't mean that they don't have that. If they're a success, doesn't mean they don't have problems, because WWE's a success and they have issues too. There will always be issues. But the idea of, I mean, what a lot of people have said for a long time, we're gonna have an answer real soon. That's,
if Tony signs a strong deal, how many people are going to quit their podcast? No, I'm just kidding. We don't have to
hey,
answer
look, some people stuck their neck out, and but I mean, it was funny because I actually had that conversation with Tony Khan once, not all that long ago. It's like, what if you sign a really big deal? I mean, there's people who have just like made a living out of you being an idiot. And he just goes, and it was really common. He just goes, they'll come up with some other moving,
that's exactly what's
moving the goalpost. It's like they'll never admit that everything they said was wrong, because many of them had him out of business in year one.
Well, and here's the other thing.
And they didn't change their tune, even though they never went out of business.
Here's the other thing. I thought about this the other day too. I was like, Dave is never going to stop writing the Observer until his hands just don't work. But what if that's happened?
That's not true, by the way.
What if, I don't want the day for you to stop writing the Observer, I guess. But like, how many podcasts and websites would go out of business if you retired?
I don't want to think about that right now, because it scares me, just because, honest to God, I think that there's a frame of reference that I don't see anyone else, or very few, really having. There's a few, but I know I when it comes to history and things like that, it's like, if I mean, it's like I don't want this thing to go away, not for me anymore, but for wrestling, because it's not like, oh my God, the journalism goes to hell. There's good people out there, but history wise, man, I don't know. I mean, there's some good historians too, but most of the good God, I'm going to bury myself. Or other people, but most of the good historians are not really that in tune with what we're going on now. And most of the people who are in tune now only have a limited knowledge of history. They only know like when we talked with Keirn, and like even with discussions I have with different people, and they'll go, oh, they're doing this, it's so stupid. I go, like, look, I watched 20 territories, and I've seen every one of these things happen, and they weren't stupid. But if you've only watched WWE, you don't know it, and you think it's wrong. It's like the guys who get mad at a 1 count kick out when in an Ishii match, when people go crazy, and it's like, dude, people went crazy. When they stop going crazy, then he'll stop doing it. You know what I mean? And that's exactly how wrestling evolves. And it's like, if they go crazy, it's not wrong, because that's what you're looking for. You're looking for the thing that oh, I hate these fighting spirit spots, or whatever, because even though Hogan did the exact same thing, but you don't think of it that way. But it's like trying to like whatever. You don't have to like what Ishii does, but it's like, when I watch him, just as an example, it's like, is it working? At his age and everything like that, and it's like, it's working. And because it's working, are people going to copy him all over the world? Because that's what happens now, because people wrestlers study now more than ever before. Yes, that's what's going to happen. And that is why styles change. And that's why we see things in matches that we never saw before. And they're not wrong if they work. And the stuff that you saw when you were a kid, if they do it now, and I've seen guys try to do that style, and when it doesn't work, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. When it doesn't work, that means that they got to learn something else. There's no, it's not one size fits all. Everyone's different. And, like that last pay-per-view, too much of the same thing for 5 hours. There's negatives to that too. That's, you want differences, you want differences, and the thing is going to evolve, and the fans are going to take it where they go, and the fans aren't wrong. You might get mad at them, when you're in the middle of this great match and all of a sudden they're chanting, "We want tables," and then they're not caring about these guys breaking their backs. I get frustrated that too, but it's like, well, and you just got to tease a table and get booed if you're a heel, or pull out a table.
You know what Mick Foley and ECW would have done? He would have put a headlock on.
That's what Nick Bockwinkel would have done too. I mean, and there's ways of teaching if you want to do that. I mean, I remember, Nick Bockwinkel's idea when people chanted boring in his match is to make it boring. He goes, that'll teach him to not make that chant in my match.
Mm-hmm. And so the buy rate number that you had, the early buy rate number.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Low
133.
It's first week estimate. Yeah. So it's, I don't think it's I guess when it comes to the day before the show, and I did the over under at 125, and where people had under, so it did better. So it's a little bit stronger. It wasn't a blow-away number. It wasn't a blow-away show. I mean, I guess if I said 125, and it may, again, it may even end up 125, may end up 135, you don't know, but where it is slightly above what I expected. So, good, and it wasn't going to be, it wasn't going to be 150 or 160. It's not that show. I was disappointed in the Dynasty number because of Danielson and Ospreay, but that's a lot of pay-per-views. Only, whatever it was, 7 weeks, I think, after the giant one. It's hard to come back from a giant one. And, Danielson Ospreay had a lot of meaning to a group of people, but not enough to where it did an extra special number. Then, we have this, and, I don't know about Forbidden Door. The decision with Swerve and Ospreay was, interesting, was not what I would have, I was tipped off. So I actually didn't know, but I kind of knew ahead of time, but I thought it was too early to make that match, but it's, Tony's steering the ship, and he's got an idea of where he's going to go. And, at the end of the day, these booking moves, they're his moves. Some are going to be right, some are going to be wrong. And, I would do everything different because no two people think alike, but, we're going to get Will Ospreay and Swerve in a main event on a pay-per-view. I mean, to complain about it, it's kind of ridiculous in a lot of ways, because goddamn, it's going to be like a great match. And
it makes the world title match up in the air. Like, when's the last time we've watched an AEW world title match and didn't have a good idea who was going to win?
Yeah, you could go either way. You absolutely could go either way, and you could make a great argument going either way. And with MJF back, you've got in theory a really big match for the winner. Not to mention, so many other people in there. Unfortunately, one being Adam Copeland, who's going to be out for a long, long time. And unfortunately, another super contender was Danielson, who they, by virtue of Danielson being so unselfish, they've beaten too much to where like you could always any week, you could next week go in there and put Swerve against Bryan Danielson. You could put Will Ospreay against Bryan Danielson for the title in television. It'd be absolutely incredible, fantastic, whatever. And you could do it. But, I don't know that they're going to do it on pay-per-view, but to me, like a Bryan Danielson, should always be one step away, from a championship match, just because of who he is and because he's going to deliver. But they got viable matches. They got a lot more pay-per-views this year, so they you have to have all that straightened. But yeah, I mean, I thought, you can't complain about the number. It's not a bad number. If you go in there, it's down from last year. It's like, well, they're also doing more shows than last year. So there's going to be some decline. I think that as long as you're over that 100, you're okay. When you start going under 100 and that could happen too. Yeah. When that happens, it's like, okay, we've either done too many shows or we're in pay-per-view trouble, and again, how long is pay-per-view viable? I mean, people told me, when did people start telling you that no one's going to, especially after WWE went to Peacock, it's like nobody's ever going to buy pay-per-view for $50. And here we are, and people are doing it multi-times a year, complaining about it, but it's the same complaint.
Except for Mayweather and Pacquiao and Mayweather and McGregor.
Yeah. Well, those shows, the extra special shows are always going to do great. It was interesting to me that I don't know what it says, that both for the WWE and AEW fans, both more bought the Canelo fight than bought the TNA show. It's not really, it's not a big number. Neither number is very big, but I just thought it was interesting about TNA, where people go like, it's another wrestling pay-per-view. And the reality is more people bought the boxing. And I'm certain, unfortunately, we don't have this because of it being on streaming, that if we did that for UFC, it would be much higher. I know with UFC, it was, the crossover was when I did get it, when they were still on TV, it was, I would bet the USA crossover, the UFC crossover with WWE would be below AEW, but not that far below AEW, but it would be way above Canelo, and I think it'd be way above any other wrestling.
The latest news is that Tyson and Jake Paul was postponed because of the ulcer issue that Tyson is dealing with.
Incident. So do we have a new date?
Nope, not yet. Netflix is probably like, I don't know about this boxing business that we're getting into.
I'll tell you what, I was never confident of that fight.
Nope.
And it was always because of Tyson. Because I just remember, Tyson and K1 and Bob Sapp. And it's like, if you remember that time, it's just like, and then they were going to do a boxing match too, not even a kickboxing match. Not that Sapp can do a kickboxing match, not an MMA fight. And to me, it's like they were going to pay Tyson millions. It's like easy money. Bob Sapp, a boxer, come on. And plus, once Bob Sapp had made money, and this was at the point where Bob Sapp had made money, he was going down on the first punch anyway. I mean, Bob Sapp once told me the story, and he goes, I don't understand it. He goes, but when you're rich, the punches hurt so much more than when you're poor. So I always thought that, that's his mentality. But Tyson never did that fight. And so, he did do the Roy Jones fight when he was really old. I wouldn't be surprised he did it, but I was never going to be surprised if this fight didn't happen either, for whatever reason, because it's and in many ways I feel it's gonna, it's gonna be a giant number for Netflix if and when it happens. There's gonna be a lot of curiosity. I mean, even me, who's sick of these whatever it is, whatever you call them, celebrity boxing, it's cute once, but after a while it runs its course. The Jake Paul thing, and Jake, I give him all the credit as far as marketing. He's great at it, and making himself relevant. He's great at it. And going against smaller guys and older guys and MMA fighters and things like this, to where, it looks like he's, whatever, and beating guys that like the layman didn't think he could beat, but anyone who knows fighting knew he was going to probably beat, I think that, all that, but I'm over it. And the public was too, because his buy rates started going way, way down. But Tyson was a different element, plus the Netflix deal being just regular on Netflix, not as pay-per-view. I think that the audience, just the weird curiosity of it, was going to be gigantic for this show. So, whatever. But again, it's now you got a guy who's like really old, 58 years old, right?
Yeah.
58 years old. That's too old to be boxing. That's just, I don't care who you are.
They do have, if this thing happens, they actually do have a really good undercard bout, which for real boxing fans, it is Amanda Serrano and Katie Taylor, their rematch.
Yeah.
So that would be real. Okay. We have we'll save the questions that were sent to me for next time when we have more free time to talk about stuff. But I do have a super chat that we'll end the show with from Trust the Process. Would it be a mistake for AEW to not have Will win the belt at All In? Some say not to rush, but there's no guarantee they even run Wembley next year. Will stays healthy or he maintains momentum.
I would not want to answer that question today because there are certain things that I think that there will be in the shows in end of August. I would say in early July, I would have a better idea of it, or maybe mid-July. My answer would go like this, though, because I've actually said this. If it looks like, they are going to draw 60,000 people at Wembley or more, and there's no guarantees of that, but as we go closer to the show, we'll know. That will probably mean that they're going to do another one next year. So that would at least open the door to, hey, wait a year and do it, make it bigger. Okay. But a year, it's like WWE could do it in a year because there's a lot of reasons. AEW and their business was great and everything like that. With AEW, it's different. I would say my gut is he should win the title at Wembley this year. I'm not going to go 100%, but I would say right now I'd be about 85 to 95% in that range that he should, because you don't want, you want something super memorable for his title win. You want to make it that, Hulk Hogan, Bill Goldberg thing. And then obviously you got to follow up on it, but you want that thing. If he wins the title, if it's in front of 50,000 or 70,000 or 60,000 in Wembley, in, where he grew up, in a great match, because he's going to have a great match as long as he didn't get hurt, and of course, you postpone it and somebody gets hurt and blah, blah, blah. And, and that can happen too. But I would say that I'd say like Forbidden Door to me is too early. They don't need to rush it. Wembley's better. So I would say I'm strongly leaning towards the idea that he should win the title at Wembley. Yes, this year. At first, when he signed, I thought it was almost a given. I thought it was like promotional malpractice if you don't do it. Now I see a little bit of wiggle room here and there because he's actually more over than I expected him to be. So I think that because he's more over, even though business isn't moving, business was moving, and then I would even be more, if business was going up with him, noticeably, I would go like, you know what? Hey, let's make the chase go longer. Let's try to figure out a way to get this going next year, but it's not. And so, yeah, more, you want to create that moment. And could the moment be bigger a year later, like with Cody? Yeah, but it's not like, but WWE was on fire and they're not. And right now there's no guarantee to me that a third Wembley is going to be viable. So I'm pretty strong. I don't think it should be at the UBS Arena. I think it should be at Wembley, long term. And especially, the other thing is there's all these European deals that are going to be free. I wrote about that, which is a story that a lot of people haven't picked up on.
But there was the person who said that he didn't think it was going to be that big of a deal for AEW because they just don't see it as, if it's not WWE, they may not want it.
Right. But that's the reason that I'm saying that Will winning is even more important. And the reason I say that is, and he even said this, is that they failed to capitalize on their momentum in Europe off of that big success at Wembley, which they did. They did fail to capitalize. They did it, then they went away. I mean, it was not, it was not promoted after the fact as big. I mean, they tried within their own means, but I don't think that it was. Now you're going into Europe to this thing. If you go and you say, this is the face of our company. He is from the UK. He's European. He won it at Wembley Stadium, the most prestigious place probably in all of Europe, in front of 60,000 people or 55,000, whatever the number is. It isn't 15. You know what I mean? It's going to be a big number, whatever the number is. And then, use that we and we've done it twice now. It's not like we've done it once. I think that makes their property far more valuable in Europe in particular. And, a lot of those, like I said, there's a lot of countries where European deals are going to be, coming due because WWE's deals are all pretty much done at the end of this year. And, and Australia, New Zealand, and places like that. I don't know how much Will being the champion is going to mean there, but I think as far as Europe goes, and especially the UK, it's not like a whatever, but it's a feather in the cap, and it does give them the, you're the face of your company is from the UK. And to me, that's a real key that in the WWE market, because in the WWE, the face, it doesn't have to be UK guys. It's like in boxing. Boxing is in the UK is big, but it's bigger in the UK when Carl Froch and Tyson Fury or whatever, Joshua. It's a lot bigger in the UK when you've got these guys that are UK guys that are in these big fights. It's not necessarily big in the United States, but that's the thing. So that's why I would say, I'm like I said, 85 to 95% yes on that one, and maybe even more. There's if like I said, if they catch fire with Will before the mid-July, it's somehow because of how great he is. I don't expect that to happen. I'm not saying it's happening. I'm saying the opposite. But if that were to happen, I would have, and Wembley is a giant success, and it ahead of time. That's when I would consider, what? The chase is sometimes better than the capture. As far as storyline goes, we don't have to rush, but that's the only way. If not, I think it's that's the move. I thought that, like I said, as soon as the negotiations were between WWE and AEW for Will, I thought that the ace that Tony Khan had was he could give Will the title at Wembley Stadium, and could be pretty confident about doing so. And in WWE, no matter what they said, you can't say the same thing, because they'll want him to spend years, and they won't necessarily, go all the way with him. They may not. No matter what they say, you don't know. They've got Roman Reigns, they got Cody Rhodes, they've got certain guys. AEW, I mean, he's the hottest guy they have, and that's the long answer.
All right, when are you and Brian coming back?
We are coming back Sunday night.
All right, Sunday night. So we will be back more than likely next Friday. So those of you who were able to check us out on the free YouTube, go ahead and subscribe, video.f4wonline.com if you liked what you see. So for everybody who is watching and listening, we appreciate you, and we will see you and Brian next Sunday, you and me next Friday.